Andrew Ward's research vessel plummeted through the atmosphere of an uncharted planet, his heart racing as he realized he was about to become stranded with an alien beauty. The renowned human explorer and xenobiologist gritted his teeth, desperately trying to stabilize the craft as it hurtled towards the surface of this mysterious world in the Orion Nebula. With a bone-jarring impact, the ship crashed into a dense jungle. Andrew's head slammed against the control panel, and darkness engulfed him. When he regained consciousness, he found himself surrounded by a sea of bioluminescent flora, their ethereal glow casting an otherworldly light on the twisted metal of his vessel. Andrew stumbled out of the wreckage, his mind racing with the implications of his situation. He was alone on an unexplored planet, light years from any human outpost. As he assessed the damage to his ship, his stomach sank. The propulsion system was completely fried, and with his limited supplies, repairs would take weeks, if not months. Gathering his wits, Andrew began to scavenge for resources in the alien jungle. The air was thick with unfamiliar scents, and strange sounds echoed through the foliage. As he pushed through a cluster of glowing ferns, he froze. There, bathed in the soft light of the bioluminescent plants, stood a creature unlike anything he had ever encountered. She was tall and lithe, with scaled skin that shimmered with iridescent hues. Her piercing eyes studied Andrew intently, a mix of caution and curiosity evident in her reptilian features. This was Ymir, a female member of the Draconis, a species unknown to humanity until this moment. Andrew's hand instinctively moved to his universal translator, but his heart sank as he realized it had been damaged in the crash. Unable to communicate verbally, he raised his hands in a gesture of peace. Ymir tilted her head, her gaze roaming over Andrew's body, lingering on his lack of scales and tail. To Andrew's surprise, Ymir gestured for him to follow. His scientific curiosity overrode his caution, and he found himself trailing behind the alien beauty as she led him deeper into the jungle. After a short journey, they emerged into a clearing where a hidden Draconis outpost stood, its sleek architecture seamlessly blending with the surrounding vegetation. As they entered the facility, Andrew's amazement turned to concern. He spotted advanced weaponry and star charts detailing human-controlled space. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He had stumbled upon a secret forward base for the Draconis, who had been monitoring human expansion into their territory. Before Andrew could process this information, Ymir brought him before a stern-looking male Draconis. This was Zorth, the commanding officer of the outpost. Zorth's eyes narrowed as he regarded Andrew, clearly viewing the human's presence as a threat to their covert operations. With a series of sharp clicks and hisses, Zorth gave an order. 2 Draconis guards stepped forward, their scaled hands gripping Andrew's arms. As they led him away to a secure room within the outpost, Andrew caught Ymir's gaze. There was conflict in her eyes, a hint of sympathy that gave him hope. Now, trapped in an unfamiliar and potentially hostile environment, Andrew Ward faced the challenge of a lifetime. He had to find a way to repair his ship, navigate the complex dynamics of Draconis society, and prevent a potential interstellar conflict, all while grappling with his growing attraction to the alluring yet enigmatic Ymir. As the door to his makeshift cell closed, Andrew's mind raced. He was a human explorer, stranded on an alien world with a beautiful Draconis who could be either his salvation or his doom. The fate of Earth-Draconis relations hung in the balance, and Andrew Ward was at the center of it all. As the door to his makeshift cell closed, Andrew Ward took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. He surveyed his surroundings, his trained explorer's eye cataloging every detail. The room was sparse, with smooth, metallic walls that seemed to absorb light. A single illumination panel cast a soft glow from the ceiling, and a small ventilation shaft near the floor caught his attention. Andrew approached the shaft, running his fingers along its edges. It was just large enough for him to squeeze through, offering a potential escape route. However, as he contemplated this option, he paused. The weight of his situation settled on his shoulders. He wasn't just a stranded explorer anymore. He was an accidental diplomat, perhaps the first human to make contact with this advanced alien species. Escaping now could jeopardize future relations between humans and the Draconis. Instead, Andrew turned his attention to his damaged universal translator. He examined the device, noting the cracked casing and exposed circuitry. With careful movements, he began to dismantle the room's lighting panel, salvaging components that might be compatible with his translator. As Andrew worked, he heard a soft hiss at the door. He looked up to see Amir entering, carrying what appeared to be food and water. Her scaled skin shimmered in the dim light, and her reptilian eyes fixed on him with undisguised curiosity. Emir set down the provisions and approached Andrew cautiously. She pointed at the dismantled lighting panel, then at the translator in his hands, tilting her head in a questioning gesture. Andrew nodded, holding up the translator and mimicking a talking motion with his hand. Emir's eyes widened in understanding, and she leaned closer to observe his work. As Andrew continued his repairs, Emir's gaze roamed over his form. She reached out hesitantly, her scaled fingers hovering near his arm. Andrew paused his work and slowly extended his arm, inviting her touch. Emir's fingers made contact with Andrew's skin, and she jerked back in surprise. Her eyes widened, and she touched him again, more deliberately this time. She ran her hand along his forearm, marveling at the texture and warmth so different from Draconis scales. Andrew couldn't help but smile at her fascination. He pointed to himself and said clearly, "Human." Emir repeated the word, her pronunciation slightly sibilant due to her reptilian vocal structure. "Who, man?" Over the next few hours, as Andrew worked on his translator, Emir returned several times. Each visit, she brought new objects, pointing to them and speaking in her language. Andrew would repeat the words, then provide the English equivalent. Slowly, they built a rudimentary vocabulary. Meanwhile, in another part of the outpost, Zorth paced before a council of Draconis leaders. The debate over Andrew's fate had grown heated. "We should eliminate the human immediately," one council member argued, his scales flushing a deep red. "His presence here threatens everything we've worked for." Another counselor countered, "But think of the intelligence we could gather. This is our first chance to study a living human up close." Zorth raised a clawed hand, silencing the debate. "I propose a compromise," he said, his voice a low hiss. "We'll use the human's obvious attraction to Emir to our advantage. She can extract information from him, learning about human weaknesses and intentions." The council murmured in agreement. Zorth summoned Emir and explained her new mission. Emir's tail twitched nervously, but she nodded her assent. Back in Andrew's cell, the universal translator crackled to life. Andrew grinned triumphantly, adjusting the final connections. When Emir entered the room again, he activated the device. "Hello, Emir," Andrew said, his words translated into the sibilant Draconis language. Emir's eyes widened in shock. You speak now?" she replied, her words converted to English by the translator. "Yes," Andrew said, excitement clear in his voice. "We can finally communicate properly. I have so many questions about your people, your world." As they talked, the cultural differences between them became increasingly apparent. Emir was fascinated by Andrew's descriptions of human society, particularly when it came to relationships and mating. "You mean humans press their mouths together?" Emir asked, her scales shifting to a pale blue in what Andrew had come to recognize as an expression of surprise. "But isn't that unsanitary?" Andrew chuckled. "It's called kissing, and it's considered quite pleasant for us. I take it Draconis don't do anything similar?" Emir shook her head. "Our mating rituals involve elaborate dances and color displays. Physical contact is minimal until the final stages of courtship." As they continued to talk, Andrew noticed Emir's demeanor change. She became more inquisitive, asking pointed questions about human physiology, social structures, and technology. Andrew answered openly, seeing an opportunity to foster understanding between their species. What Andrew didn't know was that outside his cell, Zorth listened to their conversations with growing impatience. He summoned Emir again, his scales a dark, angry red. "You're taking too long," Zorth hissed. "We need more concrete information about human defenses, their expansion plans. Use whatever means necessary to get that information." Emir's tail lashed anxiously. I understand," she said, her voice low. As Ymir returned to Andrew's cell, conflict raged within her. She had come to genuinely enjoy her time with the human, fascinated by his strange physiology and gentle manner. The thought of manipulating him left an unfamiliar ache in her chest. Andrew, unaware of the machinations around him, had been formulating his own plan. He needed to access the outpost's communication array to send a message to Earth and prevent a potential conflict. But as he looked at Ymir, saw the turmoil in her eyes, he hesitated. There was more at stake here than just his mission. He was forming a connection, bridging the gap between two vastly different species. As night fell on the alien world, tensions continued to rise within the Draconis outpost. Andrew and Ymir, caught in the middle of interstellar politics and their own growing feelings, faced difficult choices that would shape the future of human-Draconis relations. Unbeknownst to all, a human rescue team was already en route, their ship cutting silently through the vast emptiness of space towards the uncharted planet. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test the limits of Andrew's diplomacy, Ymir's loyalty, and the potential for understanding between two very different species. Species. The silence of the alien night was suddenly broken by a soft metallic scraping sound. Andrew's heart raced as he carefully removed the loosened panel in his room, revealing the ventilation shaft he had discovered earlier. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. With a final glance around the room, he squeezed his body into the tight space, the cool metal pressing against his skin. The ductwork was a maze of twists and turns, barely illuminated by the faint light seeping through occasional grates. Andrew relied on his memory of the outpost layout, carefully navigating the cramped passages. The air grew thinner as he progressed, and sweat beaded on his forehead from the exertion. As he rounded a corner, Andrew's elbow caught on a protruding seam. He tried to adjust his position, but the sudden movement caused a section of the duct to shift. Time seemed to slow as the metal groaned, and then gave way with a resounding clang that echoed through the outpost. Andrew froze, his breath caught in his throat. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the pounding of his heart. Then chaos erupted. Alarms blared throughout the facility, and the sound of heavy footsteps and barked orders filled the air. Andrew scrambled forward, knowing his window of opportunity was rapidly closing. He could hear the Draconis guards searching, their voices growing closer with each passing moment. Meanwhile, in another part of the outpost, Ymir's head snapped up at the sound of the alarm. Her scales shifted to a pale yellow, a sign of anxiety among her people. She knew instantly that Andrew must have attempted to escape. The realization sent a wave of conflicting emotions through her: concern for his safety, fear of the consequences, and a deep-seated urge to help him. Making a split-second decision, Ymir rushed to a nearby control panel. Her clawed fingers flew over the alien interface, disabling several security protocols. Lights flickered in various sections of the outpost, drawing guards away from Andrew's likely path. Back in the ventilation system, Andrew finally reached his destination. He peered through a grate into the communications center, his heart sinking as he saw the room heavily guarded. 4 Draconis soldiers stood at attention, their scaled hands gripping advanced energy weapons. Andrew's mind raced, searching for a solution. His gaze fell on a nearby storage closet, and an idea formed. Backtracking slightly, he slipped out of the vent and into the closet. Inside, he found an array of alien chemicals and compounds. Drawing on his xenobiology knowledge, Andrew quickly mixed several substances, creating a makeshift smoke bomb. With a silent prayer, he activated the device and rolled it towards the communication center. Thick, acrid smoke billowed out, filling the corridor. The guards hissed in confusion, their eyes watering as they stumbled out of the room. Andrew seized his chance, darting through the smoke and into the communication center. He rushed to the main console, his fingers dancing over the unfamiliar controls as he attempted to establish a link to Earth. The door hissed open, and Andrew whirled around, expecting to face angry Draconis guards. Instead, he found himself face to face with Ymir. Her scales shimmered with a mix of blue surprise and green concern. "Andrew," she said, her voice a mix of relief and worry, "what are you doing?" Andrew's hands never left the console as he worked. "I'm trying to prevent a war, Ymir. I need to contact Earth to explain about your people before it's too late." Emir's tail lashed anxiously as she processed his words. She glanced at the door, then back at Andrew. In that moment, she made her choice. Moving to his side, she began inputting commands, her knowledge of the system far surpassing his. Like this, she instructed, guiding his hands over the controls. Together, they managed to establish a connection with Earth's diplomatic channels. Andrew's fingers hovered over the final command to transmit when the door burst open. Zorth stood in the entrance, flanked by a team of heavily armed Draconi soldiers. His scales were a deep, angry red as he surveyed the scene before him. "Step away from the console," Zorth hissed, raising his weapon. "Now!" Andrew's mind raced, searching for a way out of this standoff. In a flash of inspiration, he remembered Emir's lessons on Draconis culture. Without warning, he began to move, his body twisting and undulating in the intricate patterns of a Draconis mating dance. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on Andrew's unexpected display. Zorth's jaw dropped, his weapon lowering slightly in shock. Even Emir stared, her scales flushing a deep purple of embarrassment and attraction. In that moment of confusion, Andrew's hand shot out, activating the transmission. "This is Andrew Ward," he spoke rapidly into the communicator. "I've made contact with an advanced alien species called the Draconis. Peaceful communication is possible, but we must act quickly to prevent misunderstanding and potential conflict." Zorth snapped out of his daze, his scales now practically glowing with rage. "Fire!" he roared, raising his weapon once more. Andrew grabbed Emir's hand, pulling her towards the large window behind them. Energy blasts sizzled past their heads as they ran. Without hesitation, they leapt through the window, shards of the transparent material scattering around them as they plummeted towards the dense jungle below. They hit the alien foliage hard, the strange plants cushioning their fall, but leaving them battered and disoriented. Andrew struggled to his feet, pulling Emir up beside him. The sounds of pursuit echoed from the outpost above. "We need to move," Andrew panted, still holding Emir's hand tightly. Emir nodded, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and exhilaration. "This way," she said, pulling him deeper into the jungle. As they ran through the alien undergrowth, alarms continued to blare from the outpost. Strange creatures scattered at their approach, their bioluminescent bodies casting eerie shadows in the darkness. Andrew's mind whirled with the enormity of what had just transpired. His escape, the message to Earth, and now his flight through an alien jungle with a Draconis by his side. He glanced at Emir as they ran, her scaled skin shimmering in the moonlight. Despite the danger, despite the vast differences between them, he felt a connection to her that transcended species. As they plunged deeper into the unknown, Andrew realized that their adventure was nowhere near the end. The true challenge of bridging the gap between their two worlds was just beginning. High above the planet's surface, the human rescue team's ship broke through the upper atmosphere, unaware of the complex situation they were about to enter. As they descended towards the planet, the potential for a diplomatic disaster or a new era of interstellar cooperation hung in the balance. Balance. The dense canopy of alien foliage swallowed up the noise from the outpost, leaving Andrew and Emir in an eerie, bioluminescent twilight. Andrew's lungs burned as he gasped for air, his body still adjusting to the planet's atmosphere. Beside him, Emir moved with serpentine grace, her scaled form perfectly adapted to the jungle terrain. They pushed through a cluster of fern-like plants, their fronds glowing with soft blue light. "We need to find cover," Emir hissed, her eyes scanning the undergrowth. "The search parties will be using thermal imaging." Andrew nodded, his gaze caught by a patch of vibrant, pulsating vegetation. "There," he pointed. "Those plants seem to be giving off heat. They might mask our signatures." They ducked into the glowing foliage, pressing close to the warm, undulating leaves. The proximity brought their differences into sharp relief, Andrew's soft skin a stark contrast to Emir's iridescent scales. As they caught their breath, Andrew's mind raced. "We need to get to my ship," he whispered. "If I can access its communication systems, I might be able to contact the rescue team." Emir's scales shifted to a thoughtful green. "It's several days' journey through treacherous terrain. We'll need to be cautious. The jungle is home to many dangerous creatures. As if on cue, a piercing shriek echoed through the trees. Andrew instinctively reached for Ymir's hand, then hesitated, unsure of the appropriateness of the gesture. Ymir, misinterpreting his movement, tensed and bared her teeth slightly. "Sorry," Andrew mumbled, pulling back. "Human reflex." Ymir's scales flushed a confused yellow. "Your species seeks physical contact when threatened?" "Sometimes," Andrew explained, feeling heat rise to his cheeks. "It's comforting." Ymir's head tilted, her alien features unreadable. After a moment, she extended her hand, mimicking Andrew's earlier gesture. "Like this?" Andrew smiled, gently taking her scaled hand in his. "Yeah, like this." They remained still as a Draconis search party passed nearby, the glow of their energy weapons visible through the dense foliage. As the danger receded, Andrew reluctantly released Ymir's hand. "We should move," he said, his voice low. "Can you lead us towards my ship?" Ymir nodded, her scales shimmering with grit. They set off through the alien landscape, each step bringing new wonders and dangers. As they traveled, Andrew found himself continually amazed by Ymir's knowledge of the environment. She identified safe paths through treacherous swamps, pointed out edible fruits, and warned him away from deceptively beautiful but deadly flora. On the third night of their journey, as they rested in the hollow of a massive tree-like organism, Ymir's scales began to shift in complex, mesmerizing patterns. Blues and greens swirled across her form, punctuated by flashes of gold. Andrew watched, transfixed. "That's beautiful," he murmured. "What does it mean?" Ymir's scales abruptly shifted to a deep purple. It's a courtship display," she admitted, her voice tinged with embarrassment. "I thought, but you didn't respond, so clearly I misinterpreted." Andrew's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I had no idea. In human culture, we express interest differently, like this." He reached out, gently brushing a strand of alien-like hair from Ymir's face, his fingers lingering on her scaled cheek. Ymir recoiled, her scales flashing a warning red. "Why are you attacking me?" "What?" "No," Andrew pulled back, holding up his hands. "That's not an attack. It's a gesture of affection for humans." They stared at each other, the vast gulf of their biological and cultural differences suddenly yawning between them. Then, unexpectedly, Ymir began to make a sound, a rhythmic hissing noise that Andrew realized was laughter. "We are quite a pair, aren't we?" she said, her scales settling into a warm, amused orange. Andrew chuckled, relieved. "We certainly are." Their moment of levity was interrupted by the sound of voices, not the harsh tones of Draconis soldiers, but softer, almost musical speech. Andrew and Ymir exchanged a glance before cautiously peering out of their hiding place. A group of Draconis moved through the underbrush, their scales a muted array of earth tones. Unlike the soldiers from the outpost, these individuals moved with an easy grace, clearly at home in the jungle. One of them, a female with intricate patterns etched into her scales, noticed Andrew and Ymir. Instead of raising an alarm, she approached slowly, her hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. "I am Zara," she said, her voice gentle. "We mean you no harm. We are outcasts like you." Andrew and Ymir emerged cautiously. Zara's eyes widened as she took in Andrew's alien form. "A human," she breathed. "We had heard rumors, but to see one in person..." She turned to Ymir. "And you, sister, you choose to aid this off-worlder?" Ymir nodded, her scales shimmering with a mix of defiance and hope. "He is not our enemy. There is much we can learn from each other." Zara smiled, the expression strange yet beautiful on her reptilian features. "Then you are welcome among us. Come, we have a camp nearby where you can rest and plan your next move." As they followed Zara and her group deeper into the jungle, Andrew felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They had found allies, but the challenges ahead, contacting the human rescue team, evading Zorth's forces, and preventing an interstellar war, remained daunting. He glanced at Ymir, walking beside him with her head held high. Despite their differences, despite the odds against them, Andrew felt a surge of something he couldn't quite name. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The jungle canopy parted, revealing a hidden valley bathed in the light of the planet's twin moons. Nestled among the bioluminescent flora, the outcast Draconis's camp beckoned, a temporary haven in a world of uncertainty and danger. Andrew and Ymir followed Zara and her group into the hidden valley, their eyes adjusting to the ethereal glow of the bioluminescent plants that dotted the landscape. The outcast camp was a collection of makeshift shelters nestled among the roots of towering tree-like organisms, their branches intertwining to form a protective canopy. As they settled into the camp, Andrew's gaze was drawn to Zara, who stood slightly apart from the group, her scales shifting in complex patterns. He approached her cautiously, still acutely aware of his alien status among these outcasts. "Zara," he began, his voice low, "we appreciate your help, but we can't stay here. I need to get to my ship's communication systems to contact the human rescue team." Zara's eyes narrowed, her tail twitching slightly. "Your ship is far from here, Andrew. The journey would be perilous, especially for one not adapted to our world." Before Andrew could respond, a commotion erupted at the edge of the camp. A group of Draconi scouts burst through the underbrush, their scales a riot of warning colors. "Zorth's forces!" one of them hissed. "They're sweeping the jungle, searching for the human and the traitor." Chaos ensued as the camp mobilized, gathering supplies and preparing to move. Andrew found himself swept up in the activity, his heart racing as he realized the gravity of their situation. He caught Ymir's eye across the clearing, seeing his own mix of fear and dedication reflected in her alien features. Zara approached them, her voice urgent. "We cannot risk leading Zorth's forces to our sanctuary. We must split up." She turned to Andrew, her scales shimmering with a mix of curiosity and willpower. "I will guide you to the communication hub. It's closer than your ship and has the equipment you need to contact your people." Andrew nodded, relief flooding through him at the prospect of action. He turned to Ymir, his throat tightening. "Ymir, you should stay here with the others. It's safer." Ymir's scales flashed a defiant red. "No, Andrew, I'm coming with you. This is my fight too." Before Andrew could argue, Zara intervened. "Neither of you can come. Ymir, your knowledge of Draconis protocols is vital. You must return to the outpost and gather intelligence. And Andrew, your human physiology makes you too vulnerable for this journey." Andrew opened his mouth to protest, but Zara silenced him with a raised hand. "This is not a debate. We leave now." With a heavy heart, Andrew watched as Ymir was led away by a group of outcasts, her scales shimmering with a mix of drive and regret. He turned to Zara, pushing down his fear and focusing on the task at hand. The jungle seemed to come alive around them as Andrew, Zara, and a small group of Draconi's outcasts began their perilous journey towards the communication hub. The bioluminescent flora cast eerie shadows, and strange creatures scuttled in the underbrush, their alien forms a constant reminder of the dangers that lurked in this unfamiliar world. Andrew's body struggled to keep pace with the Draconis, his lungs burning as he gasped for air in the planet's dense atmosphere. Zara noticed his distress and called for frequent rest stops, her scales shifting to a concerned blue. "Your kind is not built for this environment," she observed during one such break. "How do you manage on your own world?" Andrew managed a weak smile. "Earth has its own challenges, but we've adapted over millennia. He gestured at the alien landscape around them. "This is something else entirely." As they pushed deeper into the jungle, avoiding Draconis patrols and navigating treacherous terrain, Andrew's thoughts turned to Ymir. He couldn't shake the image of her being led away, the knowledge that she was heading back into danger gnawing at him. At the Draconis outpost, Ymir found herself in a stark interrogation room, faced with Zorth and his officers. Their scales pulsed with anger and suspicion as they questioned her relentlessly about Andrew and the outcast Draconis. "You betray your own kind for this alien?" Zorth hissed, his voice dripping with contempt. Ymir's scales remained steady, a calm blue in the face of their aggression. "I betray nothing. I seek understanding and cooperation between our species. This path leads to growth, not destruction." Frustrated by her defiance, Zorth barked an order. A subordinate approached with a vial of viscous liquid, its contents shimmering ominously. "The truth serum," Zorth announced, his eyes gleaming. "Your loyalty to the alien won't withstand this." As the drug coursed through her system, Ymir's body convulsed, her scales flickering through a kaleidoscope of colors. Yet even as waves of pain washed over her, she clung to her convictions, her thoughts fixed on Andrew and the future they hoped to build. Meanwhile, Andrew's group encountered a formidable obstacle, a raging river teeming with sharp-toothed, eel-like creatures. The Draconis outcasts eyed the water with trepidation, their natural swimming abilities useless against the current and the voracious predators. Zara's scales shifted to a thoughtful green as she surveyed the scene. "We need to construct a raft," she announced. "Andrew, your species builds tools. Can you assist?" Together, they gathered sturdy vines and buoyant plant matter, Andrew's knowledge of basic engineering complementing the Draconis' understanding of the local flora. As they worked, Zara's curiosity got the better of her. "Andrew," she began, her voice hesitant, "I've observed your interactions with Ymir, your species' mating rituals. They are different from ours, are they not?" Andrew felt heat rise to his cheeks. Yes. Humans, we have a process called dating. We spend time together, learn about each other. Emotional connection is important for us." Zara's scales shimmered with fascination. Fascinating. For Draconis, mating is more instinctual. Physical compatibility is paramount. As they discussed the intricacies of human and Draconis relationships, Andrew gained new insights into Ymir's behavior and the cultural chasm they were attempting to bridge. Back at the outpost, Ymir's resilience paid off. The truth serum, while causing her immense discomfort, failed to break her tenacity. In a moment of distraction from her guards, she seized her opportunity. Using a combination of her natural Draconis abilities and lockpicking techniques learned from Andrew, she managed to escape her cell. Ymir moved through the facility with purpose, her scales shifting to camouflage her against the metallic walls. When confronted by guards, she employed non-lethal takedown methods, a departure from traditional Draconis combat that left her opponent stunned in more ways than one. As Andrew's group successfully crossed the river on their makeshift raft, they finally caught sight of the communication hub in the distance. The imposing structure rose above the jungle canopy, its alien architecture a stark contrast to the natural world around it. Zara gathered the group, her scales a mix of anticipation and caution. "We'll create a distraction," she explained. "Andrew, you'll need to infiltrate the facility and access the communication array." As they prepared to execute their plan, Andrew's salvaged communication device crackled to life. A voice, distorted but unmistakably human, filled the air. "This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Earth vessel Horizon. Andrew Ward, if you're receiving this, please respond. Diplomatic relations have deteriorated. Both human and Draconis fleets are mobilizing. We have a limited window to extract you before we're forced to retreat. The situation is critical. Please respond." The gravity of the situation hit Andrew like a physical blow. The fate of two species now rested on his shoulders, and time was running out. As Zara and the outcasts launched their distraction, a cacophony of alarms and shouts erupted from the communication hub. Andrew seized his chance, slipping into the facility through a maintenance hatch. He navigated the alien corridors, his heart pounding as he relied on his knowledge of xenobiology to avoid detection systems designed for Draconis physiology. Finally, he reached the main communication array, only to find it locked down with unfamiliar Draconis encryption. As he struggled with the alien technology, alarms blared throughout the facility. The sound of approaching security forces echoed through the corridors. Trapped and running out of options, Andrew's mind raced. He thought of Earth, of Ymir, of the two species on the brink of war. He couldn't fail now. Suddenly, the door burst open. Andrew whirled around, expecting to face Draconis security forces. Instead, he found himself staring into Ymir's familiar eyes, her scales shimmering with a mix of relief and persistence. Their reunion was brief but intense, unspoken emotions passing between them as they realized the depth of their connection despite their differences. Without a word, Ymir moved to the console, her hands flying over the controls as she bypassed the Draconis security systems. Just as Andrew prepared to broadcast his message to both human and Draconis forces, the door exploded inward. Zorth stood in the entrance, flanked by a team of elite Draconis soldiers, their weapons trained on Andrew and Ymir. "Step away from the console," Zorth snarled, his scales pulsing with fury. Andrew's finger hovered over the broadcast button, the fate of two species hanging in the balance. In that moment, he knew his next action would either prevent or ignite an interstellar war. The room crackled with tension as Andrew stood poised to make his crucial decision. Taking a deep breath, he lowered his hand from the broadcast button and turned to face Zorth. "Wait," Andrew said, his voice steady despite the weapons trained on him. "I have a proposition." Zorth's scales flickered with surprise, but he didn't lower his weapon. "Speak quickly, human." "I'll share valuable information about human technology and exploration techniques," Andrew offered, his mind racing. "In exchange, I ask for the opportunity to broadcast a message of peace." The Draconis leader's eyes narrowed, his tail twitching as he considered the offer. The promise of advanced human knowledge was too tempting to dismiss outright. "And why should I trust you?" Zorth hissed. "Because this knowledge could benefit both our species," Andrew replied. "It's a step towards understanding each other, rather than destroying each other." After a tense moment, Zorth lowered his weapon slightly. "Proceed, but know that any deception will result in your immediate termination." Andrew nodded, relief washing over him. He turned back to the console, Ymir moving to stand beside him. As they worked together to craft the message, Andrew became acutely aware of her presence. Her scales shimmered with concentration, her alien features somehow becoming more familiar and beautiful to him with each passing moment. Without thinking, Andrew reached out to hold Ymir's hand, a gesture of affection so natural to humans. Ymir flinched, her scales flashing a startled yellow. The Draconis soldiers shifted uncomfortably, their own scales rippling with confusion at the strange interaction. I'm sorry," Andrew stammered, feeling heat rise to his cheeks. "It's a human gesture of... never mind." Ymir's scales settled into a curious pattern of blue and green. "Fascinating," she murmured, before refocusing on their task. With Ymir translating, Andrew crafted a message that would resonate with both humans and Draconis. He spoke of the outcast's desire for peace, the potential for cooperation between their species, and the need for diplomatic solutions. As the broadcast went out, the tension in the room was palpable. Moments later, confirmation came through. Both the human rescue team and the Draconis High Command had received the message. The escalating conflict in orbit ground to a temporary halt. Zorth, true to his word, allowed Andrew to share limited information about human technology. As Andrew spoke of Earth's advancements in space travel and terraforming, he noticed Zorth becoming increasingly agitated. The Draconis leader's scales pulsed with a mix of colors Andrew couldn't quite interpret. Suddenly, Zorth stepped forward, his tail lashing. "Enough!" he snarled. "Human, I challenge you to a mating duel for Ymir's affections." The room fell silent. Andrew blinked, certain he had misheard. "A what?" Ymir's scales flashed a shocked white. "Zorth, you can't be serious. Humans don't participate in mating duels. Their courtship rituals are entirely different." "Silence!" Zorth roared. "The human claims to seek understanding between our species. Let him prove it by honoring our traditions." Andrew's mind raced. He knew refusing could shatter the fragile peace they had just established. But how could he possibly participate in a Draconis mating ritual? I accept," Andrew said, his voice surprisingly steady. Zorth's scales rippled with satisfaction. "The duel will take place in the ceremonial arena. Prepare yourself, human." As Zorth and his soldiers left to make preparations, Zara and the other outcasts rushed to Andrew's side. "Are you insane?" Zara hissed, her scales a mix of concern and disbelief. "You have no idea what you've agreed to." Andrew ran a hand through his hair, the gravity of his situation sinking in. "Then you'd better start explaining, fast." Over the next hour, Zara and the outcast gave Andrew a crash course in Draconis mating rituals. He learned of the complex physical challenges, the importance of color displays, and the role of pheromones in attracting a mate. With each new piece of information, Andrew's confidence plummeted. "But I can't change my scale color or release pheromones," he protested. "How am I supposed to compete?" Ymir, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "You're not meant to compete, Andrew. You're meant to be you, a human. Show them the beauty of your species' mating rituals." Her words sparked an idea in Andrew's mind. He began formulating a plan, combining elements of human courtship with what he had learned of Draconus customs. As news of the impending duel spread, the communication hub became a hive of activity. Both human and Draconus leaders agreed to a temporary ceasefire to witness this unprecedented event. The human rescue team, now in contact with Andrew, raced towards the planet's surface, bringing cultural experts and xenobiologists to advise him. In the hours leading up to the duel, Andrew prepared himself as best he could. He practiced the physical movements Zara had shown him, trying to mimic the grace of Draconus courtship displays. He recorded a series of color patterns on a datapad, hoping to simulate the scale displays he couldn't produce naturally. As he worked, Andrew caught Ymir watching him, her scales shifting through a kaleidoscope of colors he couldn't interpret. He realized that regardless of the duel's outcome, their relationship had already crossed into uncharted territory. Finally, the moment arrived. Andrew entered the ceremonial arena, his heart pounding. Zorth stood on the opposite side, his scales rippling with confidence. The arena was packed with spectators from both species, all eager to witness this clash of cultures. A Draconus official stepped forward, announcing the start of the duel. Zorth immediately began his display, his scales flashing in dazzling patterns as he moved with fluid grace. The Draconus in the crowd trilled their approval. Andrew took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He knew his performance would not only determine his personal fate, but could shape the future of human-Draconus relations. With one last glance at Ymir, whose scales shimmered with an emotion he couldn't name, Andrew stepped forward to begin his own unique courtship display. The entire arena held its breath, human and Draconus alike, as Andrew prepared to demonstrate that human mating methods, while shockingly different, could be just as captivating as those of the Draconus. Draconus. With a deep breath, Andrew began his performance. He started with a series of fluid movements, combining elements of Tai Chi with the graceful motions Zara had taught him. His body flowed from one pose to the next, lacking the natural flexibility of Draconus physiology, but compensating with a uniquely human grace. The crowd murmured in confusion, their scales flickering with a mix of curiosity and bewilderment. Zorth's confident display faltered for a moment as he observed Andrew's unexpected approach. As Andrew moved, he activated the datapad strapped to his forearm. A holographic display erupted around him, projecting a dazzling array of colors and patterns. While not as organic as Draconus scale shifting, the effect was mesmerizing. The arena filled with gasps of surprise from both humans and Draconus alike. Zorth, recovering from his initial shock, redoubled his efforts. His scales rippled with intense hues, creating intricate patterns that spoke of strength, virility, and dominance. He moved with practiced precision, each gesture honed by years of adherence to Draconus mating rituals. Andrew, aware he couldn't match Zorth's natural abilities, focused on conveying emotion through his performance. He incorporated elements of human dance, his movements telling a story of discovery, wonder, and the breaking down of barriers between species. His eyes frequently sought out Ymir, trying to convey the depth of his feelings through his gaze. As the physical portion of the duel concluded, Andrew found himself breathing heavily, sweat glistening on his skin. Zorth, while appearing less fatigued, showed signs of exertion in the rapid pulsing of his scales. The Draconus official stepped forward again, signaling the start of the color display phase. Zorth's scales immediately erupted in a breathtaking array of shifting patterns, each one more intricate than the last. The Draconus in the crowd trilled their approval, their own scales flickering in response. Andrew, unable to alter his skin, relied on his holographic display, but he took it a step further, using his facial expressions and body language to supplement the artificial colors. He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he projected warmth and affection. He opened his posture, arms spread wide in a gesture of openness and acceptance. The human observers nodded in understanding, recognizing the universal signs of attraction. The Draconis, however, seemed perplexed by these strange, subtle cues. As the color display phase ended, tension filled the arena. The final stage, pheromone release, was about to begin. Zorth's scales rippled with anticipation, knowing this was where his natural Draconis biology would give him an insurmountable advantage. The Draconis leader exuded a powerful scent, a complex cocktail of chemicals designed to overwhelm potential mates. The effect on the Draconis audience was immediate, their scales shimmering in response to the potent pheromones. Andrew, lacking the ability to produce such chemicals, stood still for a moment. The crowd held its breath, wondering how the human would respond to this seemingly impossible challenge. Then Andrew began to sing. His voice, clear and strong, filled the arena. The melody was simple at first, a folk song from Earth about love transcending boundaries. As he sang, Andrew poured every ounce of emotion he could muster into the performance. He thought of Ymir, of their journey together, of the vast differences between their species that somehow didn't matter when they looked into each other's eyes. The effect on the audience was profound. The Draconis, having never experienced music in this form, were utterly transfixed. Their scales shifted in rhythm with Andrew's song, an unconscious response to the unfamiliar yet deeply moving sounds. Ymir, standing at the edge of the arena, felt her scales ripple with a kaleidoscope of colors. The song touched something deep within her, resonating in a way she couldn't fully comprehend, but felt to her core. As Andrew's voice soared to the song's climax, the entire arena seemed to hold its breath. Even Zorth stood motionless, his earlier confidence replaced by a look of astonishment. When the last note faded, silence reigned. Then slowly a low hum began to build. It started with the Draconis outcasts, spreading to the human observers, and finally encompassing the entire crowd. It was a sound of appreciation that transcended species barriers. The Draconis High Command representative stepped forward, his scales shimmering with an array of colors that Andrew couldn't interpret. He raised his hands, silencing the crowd. Never in the history of our people, the representative began, his voice carrying across the arena, have we witnessed such a display. This duel has shown us that the ways of humans, while different from our own, carry their own power and beauty. He turned to face Andrew and Zorth. I declare this duel a draw. Both participants have demonstrated the strength of their species' mating rituals. A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. Zorth's scales flashed with indignation, but a sharp look from the representative silenced any protest. More importantly, the representative continued, this event has opened our eyes to the potential for understanding between our species. It is clear that there is much we can learn from each other. As the implications of these words sank in, excitement began to build in the arena. Humans and Draconis alike realized they were witnessing a historic moment, the first step towards true interspecies cooperation. Amidst the growing commotion, Andrew's eyes found Ymir's. Her scales shimmered with a complex pattern he'd never seen before, but the look in her eyes was unmistakable. Whatever barriers existed between their species, they had taken the first steps towards bridging them. As the crowd's excitement grew, Commander Sarah Perry of the Human Rescue Team made her way through the throng, accompanied by a group of eager xenobiologists and cultural experts. Her expression was a mix of relief and amazement as she approached Andrew. Ward, she said, her voice carrying a note of disbelief. I've seen a lot of crazy things in my career, but this takes the cake. Do you realize what you've just done? Before Andrew could respond, he felt a gentle touch on his arm. He turned to find Ymir standing beside him, her scales still shimmering with that indecipherable pattern. Andrew, she said softly, her voice carrying a warmth he'd never heard before, I believe we have much to discuss. As Andrew looked between Commander Perry and Ymir, he realized that his greatest challenge was yet to come. The duel may have been over, but the real work of bridging two worlds was just beginning. Andrew found himself caught between two worlds, quite literally. Commander Perry cleared her throat, bringing Andrew's attention back to the present. We need to debrief you, Ward, and then we have a lot of work ahead of us. Andrew nodded, his mind already racing with the implications of what had just transpired. He turned to Emir, whose scales were now pulsing with a softer, more subdued pattern. I guess we do have a lot to talk about, he said with a small smile. Emir's head tilted in what Andrew had come to recognize as her equivalent of a nod. Indeed, but first, I believe your people require your attention. As Andrew followed Commander Perry, he couldn't help but glance back at Emir. She stood tall among her fellow Draconis, her scales shimmering with an iridescence that seemed to draw the eye of everyone around her. For a moment their gazes met, and Andrew felt a jolt of electricity run through him. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. The once secret Draconis outpost transformed into a bustling center of interspecies cooperation. Ships from both human and Draconis fleets arrived in orbit, their presence a testament to the historic nature of the events unfolding on the planet's surface. Andrew found himself at the heart of it all, working alongside Emir to bridge the gap between their species. They spent hours with cultural experts from both sides, piecing together a comprehensive guide for human-Draconis interactions. No, Andrew said, stifling a laugh as he watched a group of Draconis officials attempt to mimic a human handshake. Their clawed hands made the gesture awkward, and their scales rippled with confusion. It's more of a up and down motion, not side to side. Emir, standing beside him, let out a trilling sound that Andrew had come to recognize as laughter. Perhaps we should stick to our own greeting customs, she suggested, her scales flickering with amusement. Maybe you're right, Andrew conceded. Then, struck by an idea, he turned to the assembled Draconis. How about we try something a little different? Something that combines elements from both our cultures. Under Andrew's guidance, the Draconis learned to bow slightly while extending their hand, allowing for a brief touch of palms rather than a full handshake. The result was a gesture that respected both human and Draconis customs. As the days wore on, Andrew and Emir found themselves spending more and more time together. Their unique relationship became a focal point for the cultural exchange, with both humans and Draconis eager to learn from their experiences. One evening, as they took a break from the constant meetings and presentations, Andrew suggested they revisit the jungle where they first met. Emir agreed, her scales shimmering with an emotion Andrew couldn't quite decipher. As they walked among the bioluminescent flora, Andrew felt a sense of déjà vu. The alien beauty of the jungle still took his breath away, but now it felt familiar, almost like home. Emir, he said, stopping beside a glowing fern, I've been wanting to talk to you about us. Emir's scales rippled with a pattern Andrew had come to associate with curiosity. What about us, Andrew? Andrew took a deep breath, struggling to find the right words. In human culture, when two people develop strong feelings for each other, we call it love. It's more than just attraction or compatibility. It's a deep emotional connection, a desire to share your life with someone. As he spoke, Andrew noticed Emir's scales shifting through a range of colors he'd never seen before. She stepped closer to him, her eyes fixed on his face. Andrew, she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. The Draconis have a similar concept. We call it heart binding. It's a rare and precious thing, especially between different castes. She paused, her scales pulsing with intensity. I believe what I feel for you might be this heart binding. Andrew felt his heart race. He reached out, gently taking Emir's clawed hand in his own. Emir, I think I love you. In response, Emir began a series of movements Andrew had never seen before. Her scales rippled in complex patterns, and she emitted a low, melodious hum. Instinctively, Andrew found himself mirroring her movements, feeling the vibrations of her hum resonate in his chest. This is a Draconis bonding ritual, Emir explained between movements. We synchronize our heartbeats, our very life rhythms. As they moved together in the glow of the alien flora, Andrew felt a connection to Emir, deeper than anything he'd ever experienced. Their heartbeats aligned, human and Draconis, finding harmony in their differences. The moment was shattered by the sudden blare of an alarm from Andrew's communicator. Commander Perry's voice crackled through, tense and urgent. Ward, we need you back at the outpost now. We're under attack. Andrew and Ymir exchanged a look of alarm before sprinting back towards the outpost. As they emerged from the jungle, they saw chaos unfolding before them. Explosions lit up the night sky, and the air was filled with the sounds of energy weapons and shouts in both human and Draconis languages. "It's Zorth," Ymir hissed, her scales darkening with anger. "He must have gathered followers among those who oppose the alliance." Andrew nodded grimly. "Then it's up to us to stop him. Together." As they raced towards the heart of the conflict, Andrew's mind whirled with strategies. He spotted Commander Perry coordinating a group of human soldiers and made his way to her. "Commander, we need to create a diversion," he shouted over the din of battle. "Draw their attention while Ymir leads a Draconis team to flank them." Perry nodded, quickly grasping the plan. "On it, Ward. Be careful out there." As the human forces launched a series of flashbangs and smoke grenades, Ymir gathered a group of Draconis defenders. Andrew watched in awe as she communicated complex strategies through a combination of scale patterns and subtle vocalizations. The plan worked perfectly. While Zorth's forces were distracted by the human assault, Ymir's team outflanked them, herding the attackers towards the communication hub. Andrew, moving with Ymir's group, found himself face-to-face with Zorth as they cornered the renegade Draconis in the hub's main chamber. Zorth's scales rippled with fury as he glared at Andrew and Ymir. "You would betray your own kind for this alien?" he snarled at Ymir. Andrew stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Zorth, it doesn't have to be this way. Look around you, humans and Draconis fighting side by side. We're stronger together than we ever were apart." Ymir moved to stand beside Andrew, her scales pulsing with a pattern that spoke of unity and strength. She addressed Zorth in the Draconis language, her words flowing in a melodic cadence that, while unintelligible to Andrew, clearly carried great emotional weight. As Ymir spoke, Andrew noticed a change coming over Zorth. The renegade's aggressive posture began to soften, his scales shifting from angry reds and blacks to more subdued hues. "Is this truly possible?" Zorth asked, his voice heavy with disbelief and a hint of hope. "Can our species truly coexist, even thrive together?" Andrew nodded, reaching out to take Ymir's hand. "It won't be easy," he admitted. "We have a lot of differences to overcome, but look at what we've already accomplished. The potential for what we can achieve together is limitless." Zorth's gaze moved between Andrew and Ymir, lingering on their joined hands. Slowly, he lowered his weapon. I submit," he said, his scales flickering with a complex mix of emotions. "Perhaps it is time for change." As Zorth surrendered, a cheer went up from the combined human and Draconis forces. The battle was over, but Andrew knew that the real work was just beginning. In the days that followed, the summit resumed with renewed vigor. The shared experience of facing a common threat had strengthened the bonds between humans and Draconis. Andrew and Ymir found themselves at the center of it all, their unique relationship serving as a beacon of hope for future cooperation. As the summit drew to a close, Andrew was approached by a joint delegation of human and Draconis leaders. They offered him a position he never could have imagined, the first human ambassador to the Draconis homeworld. Andrew's mind reeled at the opportunity, but one thought stood out above all others. He turned to the delegation with a smile. "I'd be honored to accept," he said, "on one condition. I want Ymir to be named as my Draconis counterpart." The leaders exchanged looks, their expressions a mix of surprise and approval. After a brief discussion, they agreed to Andrew's terms. As Andrew and Ymir prepared to board the joint human-Draconis ship that would take them to their new life, they paused on the boarding ramp. Andrew turned to Ymir, taking in the sight of her scales shimmering with excitement and a touch of nervousness. "Ready for our next adventure?" he asked, extending his hand. Ymir's scales rippled with affection as she took his hand, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that now felt as natural as breathing. "With you, Andrew. Always." They stepped onto the ship together, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the vessel prepared for departure, Andrew and Ymir made their way to the observation deck. Through the large viewport, they watched as the alien planet that had brought them together grew smaller. Andrew felt Emir's hand tighten in his. He turned to her, seeing his own mix of emotions reflected in the play of colors across her scales. Without a word, they moved closer together, Andrew leaning down as Emir tilted her head up. Their lips met in a kiss, while Emir's scales erupted in a dazzling display of colors. It was a moment of perfect harmony, a blend of human and draconis expression of love and commitment. As they parted, the ship's engines hummed to life, preparing for the jump to faster-than-light travel. Andrew and Emir stood side by side, their hands still joined, watching as the stars began to blur. They were heading into the unknown, but they would face it together. Human and draconis, two individuals from vastly different worlds, united in their dedication to build a future of interstellar cooperation and understanding. The ship accelerated, streaking across the cosmos, carrying Andrew and Emir towards their new life and the endless possibilities that awaited them among the stars.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.